Okay, so this is 2.48 equations of lines. Slope-intercept form is when you have your equation and it's y equals mx plus b. So that is slope-intercept form of equations. It's the most basic linear equation. Most of you should recognize this form from algebra. Okay, so m is your slope, and b is your y-intercept. So remember, your y-intercept is where your line crosses the y-axis. So this is your y-axis. So this is your y-intercept is going to be right here. So this is your y-intercept. It's where your point crosses the axis, your axis. And then your slope, remember, is rise over run. So our rise is 1, 2, 3, 4. Our run is over 2. So our slope is 4 over 2. That can be reduced down to just 2. So 2x, following our equation, plus your b. My b value is 1, 2, 3, so my b value is -3. So our equation is y equals 2x minus 3. Okay? If we look at this equation right for b, this graph right here, we go let's find our slope. So our rise is actually going down. So we go down 1, 2, 3, 4. And then we go over 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So it's -4 over 5. And then our y-intercept is right here on our graph. So that's at -2. So this is your m. This is your b. This is your m. This is your b. So now we just put them in our equation. So it's y equals m, so -4/5 x plus our b, which is a -2, so we're going to have -2. Okay, so then we go on to c. So first we find our slope. So our slope is down 1. So down is going to be a negative over 3. So our slope is -1/3. And then our y-intercept is right here. That's just 0. So our equation is -1/3 x. And there's no intercept. You don't need to put a plus 0. Okay, so then we'll go on to d. So our slope is rise. So we go up 1, 2, 3. And our run is also 3. So 3 over 3 is just 1. So we just have x. No variable, you don't need to put a 1 in front for your slope, so you can just have x. And then our intercept is right here at +4. So it's x plus 4 for this equation. So y equals x plus 4. Okay, so now all we want to do is we want to take these equations, we want to rewrite them in slope-intercept form, which means we want to rewrite them to solve for y. Okay, so this equation, slope-intercept form, is in the form of y equals the rest of our equation. So basically we're just solving these equations for y. So to get y by itself, our first step is to subtract 6x from each side. So we get 8y equals -6x minus 16. Then we just divide by 8. So then we have y equals, so -6 divided by 8. Well, if we reduce that down, that reduces down to -3/4 x. And then -16 divided by 8 is going to give us a -2. Next, if we move on to B, again, we're just solving these equations for y. Okay? So we have a x over here. Well, we don't want an x right here, so we're going to get rid of it. So we get minus 4y equals negative x. Divide by negative 4. So we get y equals, well, if we think about this, there's always going to be this little invisible 1 in front of our variable. So we have negative 1 over negative 4th. Negative divided by negative is going to give us a positive, so we have a positive 1/4 x. Okay, move on to the next one. So again, we're solving for y. So we're going to subtract a negative 3x from each side. So we get a negative y equals negative 3x plus 5. Okay, remember your algebra skills. These are not like terms, so you wouldn't write a negative 2x. You have to keep these two terms separate. So you have a negative 3x plus 5. Keep them separate. Now we have a negative y. It's not alone yet. We need to divide by a negative 1 to get rid of this negative because our final answer is just a positive y. So if we divide by a negative 1, we'll get this just to be a y. So then a negative 3x divided by a negative 1 is going to give us a positive 3x. A 5 divided by a negative 1 is going to give us a negative 5. So now we're on to D, our last one of these. So we have this y we want to solve for. We want to get it alone. So same steps we've been doing. So we're going to subtract our 2x. So then we're going to get a negative 4y equals negative 2x plus 28. I like to put the x term first just because it follows our formula. We always have the x first and then our constant, so we have y equals mx plus b. We kind of want that in the same form. Okay, we're not there yet though because our y is not totally alone. So we just need to divide by negative 4. So now we just get y here, then we get a negative 2 divided by negative 4. If we reduce that down, our negatives cancel out and we're left with just 1/2 x. And then 28 divided by a negative 4 is going to give us a negative 7. Okay, so now the rest of our notes. When we're writing our vertical lines and we want to write an equation for them, you always have to write them in the form of x equals a. Because remember, this is our x-axis, so we're going to write them in the form as x equals. So a just represents wherever you're at on your axis. So here is where we're at. So here's our line. It's kind of hard to see. So if we look, we're at, this is a 0. So right here we're at negative 1. So our equation is going to be x equals negative 1. So that's how you write equations of vertical lines. Just x equals whatever you're on that line. Okay, so now if we move to horizontal lines, so horizontal lines is written in the form of y equals a, where a represents whatever number you're on your y-axis. So this is your y. This is your y-axis, and here's your line. So here is our line. So this is 0, 1, 2. So we're at 3. So our equation is going to be y equals 3. So that's how you write an equation of just a horizontal line. There's going to be no x's, no variables. This is just it. So y equals 3. Okay. Vertical, x equals, horizontal, y equals. Now we're on to comparing. So when we compare our equations, we want to determine whether they're parallel, perpendicular, or neither. We can compare this just from our slopes. So you want to make sure that your equations are in your slope-intercept form, and then we can compare the slope. So right here we have our slope as, these two equations are in slope-intercept form. So in this equation, our m is 5, that's our slope. In this equation, our m is also 5. So our two slopes are the same. So these two lines are parallel. Okay, so if we move on to number 2, these equations are not in slope-intercept form, so we have to do a little bit of solving first. So our first step is we're going to subtract x. So we get 2y is equal to negative x plus 2. Then we're going to divide each side by 2. So we get y is equal to negative 1/2 x plus 1. So that equation is now solved. So in this equation, our m is negative 1/2. Now if we solve this equation, so start by subtracting 6x. So we get a negative 3y plus negative 6x plus 21. Divide by negative 3. We get y is equal to, so now we have negative 6 divided by negative 3. It's going to give us a positive 2x. And then 21 divided by negative 3 is going to give us a negative 7. So in this equation, our m is a positive 2. So now if we look, a negative 1/2 and a positive 2, well, think of this as a positive 2 over 1. Now we can see that clearly these two numbers are opposite reciprocals, which means these two lines are perpendicular. Okay, you can also use our symbols. So this is the symbol for perpendicular. Two straight lines is the symbol for parallel. So if you want, you can use those symbols as well. Now we're moving on to 3 and 4. Actually, I want to save 3 and 4 for in class. So that is the end of 2.4a notes, and we'll do 3 and 4 in class.